Thank you for listening to the only podcast dedicated to bringing you the chronicles of the life of Phineas T. Swagibrad. In the last episode, Phineas set out into the woods to obtain the pelt of the fearsome Bearager, so that he could repair his balloon. Unfortunately, promptly after running through that part of the story, we misplaced our copy of the only journal of Phineas T. Swagibrad currently in existence, which caused a delay in our ability to produce the adventures of Phineas T. Swagibrad. Luckily, the journal was soon located inside our signed copy of the Odyssey, where we were using it as a bookmark. Let there be no further delays in the adventures of Phineas T. Swagibrad.
We finally set out in search of the Bearager, and discovered almost immediately our first problem. No one in our highly skilled hunting party knew where the Bearager actually was. Of course, hunters are well known for their uncanny ability to sense the windy path through the wilds that they should take to reach their prey, curving constantly in an almost unnatural way to track down even the most untraceable prey. Working by instinct, the hunters moved out all at once, stepping in almost perfect synchronization, moving away from the comforting streets of the town towards the threatening, looming boughs of the trees. With the stalking stride of skillful killers, they marched forth ahead of me, confident in their abilities. Stunned, I stared in awe at their matchless prowess. Within a few moments, I realized that in following the hunter in front of me, I had lost the others, as they were traveling in opposing directions. What ensued was the most fascinating argument I have ever seen, as the hunters began to get into physical confrontations over which direction our party should go. Eventually, it was decided that we should follow Brutus the Brave, a strong hunter who we had just discovered was in fact the strongest of the group. Behold, the wisdom of the wild. Truly fascinating. We set out into the forest, following the keen instinct of Brutus, keeping our wits about us in anticipation of our inevitable conflict with the Bearager. I took this opportunity, while traveling, to take stock of our weaponry, so we could know where we would stand when the time came for this fearsome conflict. We had, in our collective possession, 6 swords, 8 crossbows, 7 hatchets, 9 axes, 2 machetes, and no less than 17 knives between the handful of hunters in our party. Yet I feared we were not prepared for the raw power of this fearsome creature. As we made camp at midday, I discussed with my fellow travelers how we would deal with the Bearager once the time came to go in for the kill. Time soon solved that problem on my behalf, though, as a brief internal discussion between the hunters determined that Brutus's plan was the best. Use our weapons. Brilliant! I would never have thought of such a plan on my own. Reassured I had made a wise choice in hiring this group, we boldly continued into the forest, following again the mysterious path of Brutus's large frame. We have now had to make camp for the night, and if I didn't know better, I would have thought we were lost today. To my untrained eye, we seemed to come across the rock formation in the shape of a chiseled statue of King Gustavus holding a scepter at least 4 times. Brutus explained that particular rock formation is actually quite common in these woods, and that he actually wasn't able to get lost, even if he tried, because he could smell what direction he was going. We are so fortunate to be led by the best of the hunters. Our dinner was the flesh of several wee beasties caught and trapped in the forest by several of the hunters. A resplendent feast of the delicacies of the forest. Brutus elected not to catch any beasts, and instead collected some berries to share with us. He generously shared some of the berries with all of us equally. But many of the hunters opted not to eat the berries, reserving them instead for our brave leader. I tried one myself and found it to be very bitter, but Brutus explained that its bitter taste was due to the restorative power contained within this tiny berry. Gathered around the campfire, we swapped tales of adventure and sang songs. One of them had brought a flute, but he didn't know how to play it, so he just made flute noises while holding the flute in his hands. It was quite an impressive performance. These men were talented in so many unexpected ways. Once our festivities had quieted down, Brutus explained the plans for tomorrow and drew some maps in the dirt to help explain what we would do. I started losing track of what he was saying as I saw an ant foolishly crawling down a stick into the fire, seemingly unaware of his imminent peril. Crawling closer and closer to the enchanting flame, his 6 legs moving in synchronicity to his imminent doom. But I soon returned my attention to the group when I realized that everyone was staring at one of the hunters. Unsure what had been said, I made sure to nod contemplatively. That way the crew would know that I was thinking deeply about the situation and everything that had been said leading up to this moment. A few of the hunters shifted their gaze to Brutus, who was doing a magnificent trick where he changed his face to become a deep puce red. It required him to narrow his eyes in a very pointed way and put on quite an angry-looking face. Positively delighted with this magical display, I watched as he scanned over the rest of our number, taking time to considerately ask them if they had any ideas to contribute. Truly a magnanimous leader. He then concluded his magic trick by breathing out of his nose so hard that his mustache flattened. I gave him a round of applause, showing my appreciation for his skill, and the rest of our party soon followed suit. It's important to let those who take time to develop skills know that they are appreciated. Before I knew it, the night had gone on far too long. The performances were over, and it was time to put out our fire and enter our tents for the night. I hadn't brought any shelters myself, but one of the hunters had brought an extra tent, and another one brought me a cot, much more comfortable than the rock I always sleep on at home. I can't fathom a sleeping arrangement more luxurious than the experience that I had on that cot, like bringing clouds down from the sky to rest your aching body upon. It truly was a miracle of human design. During the night, we heard some distant hooting and howling from the beasts of the forest. I could have sworn at one point I heard the sounds of someone or a something scurrying through the camp, which turned into the sounds of grunts and scuffling, which soon gave way to what sounded like a full-on brawl. Now wide awake, I waited with bated breath to determine whether I would need to alert the camp or abandon them and flee before I faced the same certain doom. The sounds of conflict ended as quickly as they began, and I heard the voice of Brutus call out the "all clear." I thought I may never again get to sleep after that shock in the night, but before I knew it, I was asleep once more in the astonishingly comfortable cot provided to me by one of the hunters. As we broke camp this morning, something seemed slightly off, but I couldn't quite tell what it was. It just seemed like something was missing. Maybe it was just the night in the wilderness throwing us off of our game, but it seemed like packing up camp was much harder than it was to set up, almost as though we had less help. I couldn't help but feel that we had somehow collected less food for breakfast as well, but of course breakfast is a smaller meal, and less time had been provided to obtain food for our opening meal of the day. Brutus again brought berries for our festivities and feasting, and I enjoyed them a little bit more this time. I seem to have acquired a bit of a taste for these delicate berries, besides the fact they seemed not to be quite so bitter, and had a very different coloring to them. We soon finished our meal, and set out after Brutus, following him through woods full of stone scepter-wielding King Gustavius rock formations. I could see what Brutus meant about them being quite common, as we saw several of them throughout the day, a few of which were covered in moss. They all seemed to be at exactly the same kind of bend in the trail every time. According to Brutus, we should encounter the Bearager around 5 o'clock today. I must confess that I couldn't help but check my pocket watch many times throughout our travels today, as our inevitable fight drew ever nearer with the setting of the sun, slowly but surely drawing us closer and closer to the moment of great triumph. We anticipated a great battle before we encountered that victory in our conflict against the Bearager, and some of the hunters began to be apprehensive about this looming threat. We, however, had something the Bearager didn't have: opposable thumbs. We wouldn't be using them much in this battle, but we had something else the Bearager didn't have: brains bigger than the size of a potato. That also wouldn't do much against a Bearager, who had more than adequate brains to operate his massive paws and maw. But we also had something else that the Bearager didn't have: Brutus. The Bearager didn't have Brutus, so I knew we had no need to fear. Besides, I was much too preoccupied with other things this afternoon to be in fear of a simple death battle with a Bearager. My insides felt like they were being attacked by a swarm of angry hornets, getting revenge on someone who had disrespected their only ruling monarch and personally insulted their family line. It was highly unlikely that that was actually what was happening inside of my stomach, though, as the only hive of hornets which met that description was nowhere near here. The pain in my abdomen persisted nonetheless, causing discomfort throughout the entire journey. We arrived upon the hour of 5 o'clock, around 5 in the evening, and continued to wind our way through the woods under the direction of our trusty guide, until we found ourselves at the edge of a clearing. Stopping suddenly, I bumped into a hunter in front of me, who had given no indication to the cause of his sudden cessation of movement. Looking past him into the clearing, I soon saw the cause of his sudden and unexpected stop. A large mass slumped across the ground. Finally, our moment had come. It was the Bearager. It seemed to be lying completely still, apparently taking some sort of afternoon nap or siesta, as it surely had not used its superior sense of smell to hunt us down and tear us apart limb from limb, considering we still were alive and standing next to it. We were very fortunate. Now, the hunters all had to determine at this point who would be the first person to go in and strike the beast, no longer quite so bold now they had come face to face with the threat they'd been anticipating all day. Just as suddenly as we had stopped to discuss our plans, Brutus started running and yelling into the clearing. The beast made not a single movement, not even reacting to his loud calls, clearly paralyzed with fear. Without any kind of response from the Bearager, Brutus bravely attacked the still, unmoving beast, eliminating this threat and waving his spear in the air with a victorious cheer. Everyone started rushing in excitingly, and within moments we had plenty of material to fix my balloon. Surely the tales of Brutus the Hunter will be told for many generations to come, and my balloon will soon be in the air again.
Thank you for supporting the adventures of Phineas T. Swagibrad. Support from viewers like you is what makes the adventures of Phineas T. Swagibrad possible. Today, we'd like to take a moment to talk about bread. Bread is an important part of a balanced diet. So if you find yourself unable to ride a bike or scooter or falling down spontaneously, try eating some bread. It might do you a lot of good.